Hello everyone, my name is Chris Schaefer. I'm the president of the Heritage Lake POA Board of Directors and want to share with you information about an upcoming initiative that has pretty big implications with regard to the future of this community. This video is the second in a series of 8 meant to help you understand the background, reasons for, and answers to your questions around the covenant petition. Hopefully, you've already seen Introduction to Heritage Lake Covenant videos, which helps explain the information being shared and the reason we're working so hard to explain the issues before us. This video will focus on an explanation of how the bylaws and covenants work and how they impact the way we manage our community. The short answer to what bylaws and covenants are and why you should care is this. Those are the legal documents that define how our POA is run and what our rights are as members of the POA. Only the board vote to approve bylaw changes, and only the community can vote for covenant changes. You have the power to change the covenants. You always have. You need to know how and why it may be in your best interest to do so. You should care because the outdated covenants are preventing us from taking advantage of the technology and tools of today's world, and are keeping us locked in the rules defined over 40 years ago. We are a much different community now, and our needs are different than they were back then. Now for the detail behind the answer. This is a little longer, but it's more in depth. The Board of Directors for this community provides oversight of the budget, expenditures, projects, approves and oversees our work that our committees do, and seeks to make sure all of that is done legally. There are 2 very important documents which essentially define the rules for operation as an association. The first of these important documents is known as the bylaws. These are a set of rules which help define the POA organization, outlines election and voting rules, meeting rules, and rules established by and for the Board of Directors. In a nutshell, our bylaws help us define the rules by which our board and community leadership operates. The bylaws may be altered, amended, or repealed by majority of the vote of the Board of Directors, providing changes are not in violation of our covenants or Indiana law. This means that the board can change the bylaws without a vote from the community. Any board-approved changes made to the bylaws are reviewed and approved by the POA attorney and filed with the Putnam County Recorder. So in summary, bylaws are relatively easy to modify with an affirmative vote by the board, and after the vote and filing, the changes become legally binding. The first governing bylaws were written in 1976, and since that time have been updated over 20 times. The second document, and the focus of this voting campaign, is the Declaration of Covenants for Heritage Lake. We commonly refer to these as the covenants. The covenants define membership rights with respect to voting, property ownership rules and restrictions, assessments, A&E committee guidelines, and building guidelines. These, like the bylaws, are legally binding. But unlike the bylaws, changes to covenants may only be made if 2/3 of all lot owners vote formally to do so. Today, 2/3 of the owners equates to about 1,900 votes. Before a covenant change proposal can even be distributed to our community, it must first be approved by our attorney to ensure all wording complies with any legal requirements. The covenants, like the bylaws, were also written in 1970-something, and they've been updated a total of 0 times since their creation. That's not a single change since the time they were written over 40 years ago. 40 years ago, there were no mobile phones, no internet. There were a few years after seatbelts were required nationally, and we all used rotary phones. In 2014, the Long-Term Planning Committee, who's tasked with continuously developing initiatives focusing on the long-term needs of our community, solicited a company named O'Neill Research LLC to create a strategic plan for our community with the outcome defining the requirements for land use, watershed management, road maintenance, emergency services, government and community relations, and governance. The following extracts are taken directly from that plan, which illustrates the concerns about the limitations of our current covenants. Number 1, input from the steering committee, key informant interviews, focus groups and surveys indicate that there are serious concerns about the capacity of the present governing framework to manage a growing community. Number 2, Heritage Lake is now a compact community of over 3,000 people and is much larger than many towns such as Cloverdale. However, its covenants provide a legal framework for managing a subdivision and not governing a community. This puts Heritage Lake at a disadvantage in terms of taking decisive action to improve basic services such as road maintenance and assure the health and safety of its residents. Number 3, a major effort to inform and educate property owners on the undemocratic nature of the present system. Each subdivision has a vital veto in making amendments, and non-resident property owners have a vote on what services residents will receive. The recommended action from that plan was to organize and implement a long-term campaign to build support among property owners, both residents and non-residents, to amend the covenants in order to create a governing framework based on more representative principles. That gives us pretty good reason to keep pursuing the changes that we're proposing. Additionally, last year's effort included 3 different mailings to get all lot owners to vote. We received less than 50% of the ballots back. So even though around 70% of those returned were yes votes to change the covenants, we couldn't do it because we didn't receive the required 2/3 all lot owner ballots to meet the 1900-something threshold. It was clear to the board that those who did vote, the overwhelming majority, were in favor of the proposed changes. We are acting now on behalf of those members of the majority. For those who didn't return their ballots, there's no way for us to determine whether it was because they assumed abstaining would be counted as a no vote, or abstaining wouldn't have an impact, or they didn't understand the reason or the implication of the vote. So we're trying again. We're trying to be better. We're trying to better explain the issues and answer questions, so please reach out to any member of the board if we've missed something in these videos. We want to help. Both the covenants and the bylaws are available at your request from the office or on the HLPOA website. This was the second in a series of 8 videos created to help explain the covenant campaign.